You
The
seem
beta
unusually
laughed while
cheerful this morning.
rejecting
Well,
him,
why shouldn't
until
I
the
be?
Alpha King
It's a
marked her in
beautiful
front
day
of
for a
him.
victory. Let's
Within the
hope the
grand
fighting
hall,
matches the weather.
tapestries fluttered slightly, as if unsettled by the tension in the room. Alara stepped cautiously onto the cold stone floor, her heart beating with a mixture of fear and determination. Tonight was not an ordinary evening. Tonight she would face the court. She had spent months preparing for this moment. Every word she had rehearsed, every gesture she had practiced had led to this. The beta of the northern clan, Kaelin, known for his sharp tongue and cunning eyes, was seated at the high table. Rumors of his power and influence had spread across the lands, and she had come seeking his favor. Alara drew a deep breath and walked forward, her boots echoing against the hall. Her cloak of deep green brushed against the floor, and the golden clasp at her shoulder shimmered faintly in the torchlight. She kept her head high, though inside, a storm of doubt raged. "Do not falter," she whispered to herself. "This is your chance. Make it count." Kaelin's eyes, cold and calculating, landed on her the moment she stepped into the light. He was taller than most men, with dark hair that fell in sharp angles across his forehead. There was a cruel elegance to him, a danger hidden beneath the charm of his smile. The court waited silently, sensing the tension between them. Alara approached, her voice steady despite the nervous tremor in her chest. "Beta Kaelin, I have come seeking your guidance and perhaps your protection." Kaelin laughed. It was a short, sharp sound that echoed like a blade through the hall. The courtiers exchanged glances, some hiding smirks behind their hands. "Protection," he repeated, tilting his head as if amused by a child who thought she could bargain with kings. "And why should I protect a stranger from the north? Surely your life is your own burden to bear." Alara's cheeks burned, not from shame but from the sting of dismissal. She had known it would be difficult, yet she had not expected such scorn. Yet she did not bow her head. Instead, she held his gaze, steady as the winter winds outside. "I am no stranger," she said softly, yet with a firmness that carried through the hall. "I am someone who understands loyalty and strength. I only ask that you see me as capable." Kaelin's smile widened, and it was clear it was not the smile of amusement but one that wielded power. "Capable, perhaps, but you are bold to think that words alone can sway me. Bold and foolish." He leaned back in his seat, resting an arm on the carved wood of the table. "You speak of loyalty, yet loyalty is earned, not claimed." Alara's heart pounded. She had anticipated rejection, yet this felt different. Kaelin's words were sharper than knives, and his laughter seemed to echo through her very soul. Still, she would not retreat. Not now. She raised her chin, her eyes glinting with quiet fire. Before she could speak again, a hush fell over the hall. A presence, commanding and fierce, swept through the room like a storm. All eyes turned as the doors at the far end opened, revealing the Alpha King, Tharion. His cloak of deep black flowed like shadows behind him, and his eyes, silver and piercing, scanned the hall with a power that made even the bravest knights falter. Tharion moved with a quiet authority that demanded attention. When he approached the high table, his gaze settled on Alara. In that moment, the hall seemed to breathe with anticipation, as if even the walls recognized the weight of his presence. Kaelin stiffened. The easy arrogance he had worn moments before faltered, replaced by a flicker of unease. He was no stranger to power, yet the Alpha's attention held a force that he could not ignore. Alara felt a shiver run down her spine, not from fear, but from the strange warmth that seemed to radiate from Tharion's gaze. He stopped before her, silent for a moment, and the air itself seemed to still. "You," Tharion said, his voice low but firm, carrying the authority of the throne and the weight of storms. "Do you know what you have done, stepping here with courage that borders on recklessness?" Alara's throat tightened. "I seek only to prove myself, your majesty." Tharion's silver eyes softened slightly, a hint of curiosity hidden beneath the sternness. "Prove yourself, yes, but not to him." He nodded toward Kaelin, whose jaw tightened, his earlier laughter now a fragile thing. You are marked." Before Alara could question his meaning, Tharion reached out and touched her wrist. A warmth spread through her, a quiet fire that seemed to coil around her bones and seep into her very being. The mark appeared, faint but glowing, a symbol that shimmered with strange light. Kaelin's face went pale. He leaned forward, his voice barely a whisper. What is this?" Tharion did not answer him. Instead, he looked at Alara with a weight of meaning that made her heart race and her mind reel. The mark was no mere symbol. It was a bond, a claim, a promise of power and destiny intertwined. And it was not to be broken by laughter or scorn. Alara's mind swirled with conflicting emotions. Fear, yes, but also something deeper. A strange exhilaration, a pull toward the alpha that she could not name. The hall seemed to blur around her, the faces of the courtiers fading as if only she and Tharion existed in that frozen moment. Kaelin stumbled backward, his composure shattered. He had been the one with power, the one who laughed, who commanded attention. Yet here he was, silenced and overshadowed by the very woman he had dismissed. Tharion's hand left her wrist and the mark remained, glowing faintly, a whisper of a promise. He straightened, his eyes scanning the hall, daring anyone to challenge him. No one did. No one could. "You will learn," he said, turning his gaze back to Alara, "what it means to be marked, and in time you will understand the power that lies within you. But know this, you are not free to retreat. Your path begins now, and it will not be easy." Alara swallowed hard, her mind racing. The humiliation she had faced moments ago now seemed distant, replaced by a strange, heavy anticipation. She did not fully understand the mark, nor the weight of Tharion's words. But she knew one thing clearly. Her life had changed forever, and the choices she made from this moment would shape not just her destiny, but the fate of the kingdom itself. Kaelin's eyes met hers, a mixture of shock, jealousy, and perhaps a hint of newfound respect. He had laughed at her, dismissed her, believed she was nothing. And yet, in front of the Alpha, she had become more than he had imagined. The hall was silent, save for the crackle of torches and the whispering wind outside. And in that silence, Alara felt a spark ignite within her, a determination, fierce and unyielding. She would not falter. She would not bow. She would embrace the mark, whatever it demanded, and prove that her courage and spirit were worth more than laughter or scorn. As the court slowly began to stir, murmuring and casting curious glances at the marked woman, Alara stood tall. Her heart pounded, not with fear alone, but with anticipation and a strange, thrilling exhilaration. The path ahead was uncertain, fraught with danger and challenges she could not yet imagine. But one thing was certain. She would face it all, marked by the Alpha, and the world would not see her the same way again. Outside, the wind howled through the frozen trees, carrying her resolve into the night. And somewhere in the shadows, eyes watched, waiting for what would come next. The first step of her journey had begun. And already the kingdom seemed to hold its breath. The hall was quieter now, but the air still thrummed with tension. Alara's wrist tingled where Tharion's mark glowed faintly, a subtle warmth that pulsed with her heartbeat. She could still feel his gaze on her, silver eyes sharp and unreadable, like the frost-covered mountains that surrounded the kingdom. She did not understand the mark, but she knew it had changed everything. Kaelin, the beta, lingered near the high table, his usual confidence replaced with a storm of emotions he could not hide. His dark eyes followed Alara, shadowed with jealousy, curiosity, and disbelief. She had survived his laughter. She had been touched by the Alpha, marked in a way that drew power and attention beyond anyone's understanding. Kaelin had underestimated her, and now he saw a force rising he had not accounted for. Tharion moved silently through the hall, his presence commanding, yet his movements carried an unexpected softness when he was near her. Alara kept her gaze lowered, unsure of how to meet his eyes, yet unable to look away completely. There was something magnetic about him, a power that made it impossible to think clearly when he stood near. "You should rest," Tharian said finally, his voice low, carrying an authority that made everyone in the hall step back. He reached for the door leading to his private chambers. The mark is not merely a symbol, it is a bond, and bonds demand understanding, training, and restraint. Elara followed silently, her cloak brushing the stone floor, her mind spun with questions. Why me? Why now? What does the mark mean? But she did not dare speak them aloud, not yet. Tharian did not often repeat himself, and every word he spoke seemed measured, purposeful. The chamber was dimly lit by candles, their soft glow reflecting off polished dark wood. The room was filled with ancient tomes, relics, and the faint scent of herbs. Tharian gestured for her to sit. She lowered herself onto a carved chair, her hands trembling slightly, partly from exhaustion and partly from anticipation. "You are strong," Tharian said, pacing slowly. "Stronger than you know, but the mark, it is not just a connection between us. It is a test. It will awaken abilities within you that you may not yet understand, and with power comes responsibility." Elara swallowed hard. "Abilities," she whispered. I do not know what I can do." Tharian stopped and studied her. For a moment he was silent, as if weighing his words carefully. "The mark is not a curse. It is a gift, but it demands discipline. It will push you, challenge you, force you to confront your fears, and if you falter, it can consume you." Elara felt a chill run down her spine. The warning was not threatening, but it was undeniable. She had faced Kaelin's scorn without faltering, but this was different. The mark was alive in some strange way, like a quiet heartbeat against her skin, pulsing with anticipation and promise. "I will do what I must," she said finally, her voice firmer than she felt. "I will not fail." Tharian's eyes softened briefly, a flicker of approval in the storm of his silver gaze. "Good, that is the first step." He walked to a shelf lined with small vials, bottles, and charms. "You will need training, understanding, and you will need to trust me." Elara hesitated. Trust was not something she gave easily, not after a lifetime of proving herself in a world that dismissed her. But there was a pull between them, something undeniable that made her nod. "I will try." For hours he guided her, not with words alone but with small lessons. How to sense the flow of energy within her, how to focus her thoughts, how to resist the pull of fear. Each step was difficult, exhausting, yet thrilling. She felt a spark awaken, a strange awareness that her senses had sharpened. She could feel the movement of air, the subtle vibrations in the floor, and the faint pulse of life in the walls around them. And through it all, Tharian watched her. Not like a teacher merely observing a student, but like someone who recognized a rare and powerful spirit, something that demanded attention and care. His proximity stirred emotions within her she did not yet understand: respect, awe, and something that fluttered dangerously close to longing. Hours passed, and the moon rose high outside the window, casting a silver glow across the chamber. Elara finally sank into a chair, exhausted, her body trembling from the strain of focus and effort. "You are learning quickly," Tharian said softly, moving to stand beside her. "Faster than I expected, but power alone is not enough. Control, discipline, and understanding are what separate the strong from the reckless." Elara looked up at him, her eyes meeting his silver gaze. For a moment, the world outside the chamber seemed to vanish. She saw not the Alpha King, ruler of a kingdom and master of supernatural forces, but a man of strength and purpose who understood the weight of responsibility. And she realized she wanted to understand him, to meet him on his level, not as a student, but as someone who could stand beside him. The sound of a door creaking interrupted the moment. Kaelin stepped into the chamber, his dark eyes flashing with anger and confusion. "Alpha," he said, his voice sharp. "What is the meaning of this? She is not ready. You cannot." Tharian's gaze snapped to him, sharp and unyielding. "Kaelin," he said slowly, "you would do well to remember your place. This woman is under my protection and guidance. Interference will not be tolerated. Kalen's jaw tightened. He had laughed at Alara moments before, dismissed her as nothing. Now, in the presence of the Alpha, he realized he had misjudged everything. The fire in her eyes, the quiet determination that refused to be broken, she was more than a challenge. She was something he could not name, yet it stirred a strange unease within him. Alara felt a rush of conflicting emotions, fear, triumph, and a thrill she did not understand. Kalen's arrogance had been a shield, and seeing him falter awakened something fierce within her. She would not allow herself to be dismissed again. Tharian studied Kalen silently, his eyes narrowing, and the beta finally stepped back, defeated but still burning with unspoken feelings. "This is not over," Kalen said finally, voice tight with frustration. He left the chamber, the echo of his boots fading into the distance. Alara exhaled, relief and tension mixing in her chest. She turned to Tharian, whose expression had softened once more. "Do not let him trouble you," he said. "Kalen underestimates strength he cannot see. That is his mistake, not yours." Alara nodded, though her mind raced. Strength, power, understanding, trust. All words heavy with meaning, all words she had only begun to grasp. And yet beneath them something deeper pulsed, a connection she could not name, a bond that was both thrilling and terrifying. Days passed and her training continued. Each day brought new challenges, small tests and exercises that honed her awareness and control. The mark pulsed with her heartbeat, responding to her focus and determination. Sometimes it flared with light, startling her, reminding her that this was no ordinary gift. Tharian's lessons were strict but fair. He pushed her, challenged her, and demanded attention to every detail. And yet, in the quiet moments when the training paused and the world fell away, she saw glimpses of a man beneath the Alpha King. A man with patience, thoughtfulness, and a strange warmth reserved only for her. Alara began to realize that the bond between them was more than physical. It was emotional, spiritual, and deeply personal. She felt a pull toward him that she could not name, a longing that grew with every glance, every touch of guidance, every moment shared in the silence of the chamber. One night, as they practiced in the courtyard under the silver light of the moon, Tharian paused. He held out his hand and the mark on her wrist pulsed brightly. "Focus," he said softly. "Listen to it. Let it guide you." Alara closed her eyes, feeling the warmth spread through her arm, through her chest, and into her mind. She felt power, potential, and a strange sense of destiny intertwining with her very being. When she opened her eyes, Tharian's gaze met hers, steady and unwavering. "You are ready," he said quietly. "But readiness is only the beginning. There are forces in this kingdom that will seek to test you and me. Be prepared, Alara. The path ahead will not be easy." Her heart raced. The trials she had faced with Kalen seemed distant now, almost insignificant compared to what Tharian hinted at. Yet beneath the fear, a thrill ran through her. Anticipation, courage, and a spark of something that felt dangerously like hope. As they stood together under the moonlight, the wind carrying the scent of snow and pine, Alara realized that she had crossed a line. She was no longer merely a girl seeking recognition. She was marked. She was chosen. And she would face whatever came next, not alone, but with the Alpha King who had seen her strength before even she fully understood it. Somewhere in the distance, Kalen watched from the shadows. His jealousy burned, but beneath it, a grudging respect began to take root. He had laughed at her once, dismissed her as nothing. Now he understood that Alara was more than a joke, more than a girl who could be ignored. And he wondered, with a mixture of awe and unease, what the Alpha had seen in her that he had missed. The night deepened, stars glittering like shards of silver across the sky. And in the quiet of the courtyard, Alara felt the pulse of the mark, the quiet hum of destiny, and the growing pull of something she could not yet name, but would have to face, whether she was ready or not. The first challenge was coming, and the kingdom itself seemed to hold its breath, waiting for what was about to unfold. The forest outside the northern kingdom was alive with shadows. Moonlight streamed through the branches, casting patterns that shifted and danced across the ground. The air was heavy with mist, carrying the scent of pine, earth, and something older, something that hummed with forgotten power. Elara and Tharian moved cautiously through the trees. She had grown stronger over the past weeks. The mark on her wrist no longer pulsed nervously but glowed steadily, a quiet pulse in time with her heartbeat. She had learned to sense it, to let it guide her, and she was beginning to understand the connection it forged between her and the Alpha. Yet even as she walked beside him, a part of her remained uncertain. The bond was strange, electric, and sometimes frightening. She had trusted him to teach her, to guide her, but trust, she realized, was not simple. It was fragile, easily broken, and built slowly, one step at a time. "Stay close," Tharian said, his voice low, carrying a weight that demanded attention. "The forest is not safe. Forces from the rival factions know you are marked. They will not hesitate to exploit any weakness." Elara nodded, gripping the hilt of a short blade at her side. She had trained in swordplay as part of her preparation, though her strength lay in her growing control over the mark. She could feel subtle movements of energy in the air, small ripples that warned her of danger. The sound came first as a whisper, leaves rustling where no wind blew, the faintest hum in the air. Then came the shadows, figures moving with unnatural speed and silence, circling them like wolves hunting prey. Elara felt her pulse quicken. "Remember your training," Tharian said. "Focus on the mark, let it guide you." She closed her eyes and drew in a slow breath. The warmth of the mark spread through her arm and chest, centering her. Her fear began to fade, replaced by a calm awareness. She could sense the shapes of the intruders, their movements, their intentions. When she opened her eyes, her hands glowed faintly with light, and the figures paused, hesitant. Tharian moved beside her, sword drawn, but he did not strike. He trusted her to lead. Elara took a step forward and whispered a command only she could hear, letting the bond with the mark guide her power. A surge of energy flowed from her, pushing the shadows back. They hissed and retreated, dissolving into the mist, leaving her and Tharian standing in the moonlight. "Impressive," Tharian said quietly, his silver eyes studying her with a mix of pride and something deeper. "You are learning faster than I imagined. But remember, power without control is dangerous. You must always remain aware, always remain disciplined." Elara nodded, her chest still pounding with adrenaline. I think I understand, Alpha. The mark, it responds to my will, but only if I remain calm and focused." Tharian's gaze softened, and for a moment the fierce ruler of the kingdom was replaced by the man beneath, the one who recognized courage, determination, and the quiet fire of her spirit. "Good," he said. "That understanding is the first step. Next, we must test it further." They continued through the forest, deeper into the unknown. Elara felt the weight of each step, not just physically but emotionally. She was learning, growing, and changing in ways she could not yet name. And with each challenge, the bond between her and Tharian deepened, a quiet current of trust and understanding that neither of them fully acknowledged yet. But even as she focused on her training and the growing connection with the Alpha, Kalen's shadow lingered in her thoughts. The Beta had been humiliated, and though he had retreated, Elara knew he would not remain distant for long. She could not predict what he might do, or how he would respond to her growing strength. The next day they reached the edge of the forest, where ruins of an ancient castle rose from the ground like bones of a forgotten era. The stones were cracked, covered in moss, and etched with symbols that pulsed faintly with magic. Tharian paused at the threshold, his eyes scanning the area with a careful intensity. "These ruins are old," he said, "older than the kingdom itself. The rival factions use this place as a staging ground. They will test us here, and you must be ready." Alara stepped forward, her heart steadying as she felt the hum of energy beneath the stones. The mark on her wrist flared faintly, responding to the latent magic surrounding them. She took a deep breath. "I am ready," she said. Tharian studied her for a moment, then nodded. "Good, trust yourself, trust the bond, and trust me." The first attack came without warning. Shadows emerged from the broken walls, moving with unnatural speed and precision. Alara felt her pulse quicken, but she did not falter. She let the mark guide her, sending bursts of energy that pushed the intruders back. Tharian fought beside her, his movements fluid, precise, and deadly, yet he never took the lead. He allowed her to act, to test her control. They moved as one, a silent understanding passing between them. Each strike, each movement, each pulse of energy connected them in a way that words could not. Alara felt a thrill, a dangerous exhilaration, as if the bond itself was teaching her not just power but trust. When the last shadow dissolved into mist, Alara collapsed onto a stone bench, exhausted but triumphant. Tharian knelt beside her, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You did well," he said softly. "Better than I expected." Her chest heaved as she caught her breath. I did it because of the mark. Because of you," she admitted quietly. Tharian's silver eyes softened, but he did not respond immediately. Instead, he helped her to her feet, guiding her through the ruins as they prepared to move on. "You are growing stronger," he said finally, "but strength is not enough. There will be choices, tests, and sacrifices ahead. Are you ready for that?" Alara nodded, her resolve firm. "I have to be. I cannot falter now, not when so much depends on what I can do." As they moved through the ruins, Kalen appeared again, his expression a mixture of frustration and awe. He had followed them, watching from a distance, and now he stepped into view, his dark eyes narrowing. "You've changed," he said quietly, almost to himself. She is stronger than I thought." Alara met his gaze, her own calm and steady. "I am no longer the one you laughed at," she said firmly. "Do not test me." Kalen's jaw tightened. For the first time he felt fear, not of her but of what he could not yet understand. Her courage, her strength, and the strange bond with Tharian had created something beyond his comprehension. And beneath the jealousy, a quiet respect began to take root, mingled with a desire for redemption for his own past arrogance. Tharian stepped forward, his presence a shield between Alara and Kalen. "This is not your fight, Beta," he said. "Step back." Kalen hesitated, then slowly nodded. "I will watch. But do not think I am done," he said, and he retreated into the shadows. Alara felt a mix of relief and unease. Kalen's return reminded her that challenges were not only from unknown enemies, but also from those who had once dismissed her. She could not ignore the past, nor could she fully trust the present. Yet as she looked at Tharian, standing silently beside her, she felt a quiet strength settle in her chest. The ruins were silent once more, but the weight of the challenges ahead pressed upon them. Alara understood that the bond she shared with Tharian was not merely a connection of power, it was a connection of destiny. And destiny demanded courage, trust, and the willingness to face the unknown. As they prepared to leave the ruins, Alara glanced at the mark on her wrist, glowing softly in the moonlight. It pulsed with warmth, a quiet reminder that she was not alone. She had grown stronger, learned to trust herself, and begun to understand the bond that tied her to the Alpha King. Yet even as she felt that strength, a shadow moved at the edge of the forest. Something unseen, ancient, and dangerous watched them. The rival factions were only the beginning. A deeper threat lingered, one that would test not only her power but her heart, her courage, and the bond that had been forged in fire and shadow. Alara shivered, but not from fear. She had faced laughter, scorn, shadows, and challenges. Now she would face the unknown, and she would do it with Tharian at her side, their bond stronger than any fear, their hearts quietly entwined by destiny. The forest held its breath, the ruins whispered secrets of the past, and the mark pulsed softly on her wrist, promising power, trials, and a destiny she was only beginning to understand. The journey was far from over. And somewhere in the shadows, eyes waited, plotting the next move in a game that had only just begun. The kingdom trembled beneath the shadow of the coming eclipse. Daylight faded to a dim gray, and the air held a tense hush, as though even the winds had stopped to watch what was about to unfold. Alara stood atop the battlements of the castle, the mark on her wrist pulsing faintly, glowing with quiet power. Her cloak fluttered in the wind, but her gaze remained fixed on the distant forests, where a dark mass moved, shifting like smoke. The rival faction and something older, something darker, waited beyond the trees. Beside her, Tharian's presence was a constant, grounding her. His silver eyes scanned the horizon, alert to every movement, every sound. For weeks, they had trained, fought, and grown together. Now all the lessons, all the courage, and all the trust would be tested. "You are ready," Tharian said quietly, his hand brushing briefly against hers. The gesture was subtle, but it carried more than comfort. It carried trust, partnership, and a quiet promise. Alara nodded, her heartbeat steady, though adrenaline coursed through her veins. "I am ready," she repeated, though a small part of her could not deny the flutter of fear. The challenge ahead was unlike any she had faced before. The first wave of shadows emerged as the eclipse began, swallowing the sun and casting the world in twilight. Figures moved with unnatural speed, their shapes twisting and shifting, their intent clear. They came not only to attack but to test, to exploit any weakness. Alara felt the mark pulse strongly against her skin, the warmth spreading through her arm and chest, igniting her awareness. She focused, letting the energy guide her movements, each step precise, each motion deliberate. Light flared from her hands, illuminating the darkness, forcing the shadows back. Tharian fought beside her, his sword moving with a fluid precision that left no space for error. And yet, he allowed her to act, to lead, letting her strength shine through. Together, they were a force neither the enemy nor the forest could withstand. Kalen appeared suddenly at the edge of the battlements, his face determined but cautious. The beta's presence had been unseen until now, and his eyes met Alara's briefly. There was tension in the glance, a mix of apology, acknowledgement, and a desire for redemption. "You've grown stronger than I imagined," Kalen said, his voice carrying over the wind. I misjudged you." Alara did not respond. There was no need. Actions spoke louder than words. She turned back to the encroaching shadows, focusing all her energy on the task at hand. But inside, a part of her softened at Kalen's words, recognizing that even the proudest hearts could change. The battle raged. Shadows twisted, shapes collided with bursts of dark energy, and the very air seemed to hum with tension. Alara's mark flared brightly, responding to her concentration and determination. Every pulse of light pushed back the darkness, carving paths of safety for the guards and allies who fought beside them. Tharian moved with calm ferocity, protecting Alara when needed, but never overshadowing her. He had taught her, guided her, and now he watched with pride as she wielded the mark with clarity and control. In the chaos, there was a moment of stillness, a heartbeat where their eyes met, and she saw in him a quiet acknowledgement of her courage. Then the eclipse reached its peak. Darkness blanketed the sky, and the shadows surged forward, their forms more twisted and dangerous than before. Alara's chest tightened. She could feel the raw force of the enemy pressing against them, testing the limits of her power. "Focus," Tharian shouted, his voice cutting through the gloom. "Remember the bond, trust yourself." Alara drew a deep breath, feeling the warmth of the mark spread through her entire being. She extended her hands, and a brilliant wave of light shot outward, dissolving many of the shadows in an instant. Some fell back, retreating into the dark forest, while others dissolved entirely, unable to withstand the pure force of her will. Kalen leapt into the fray, striking with precision and skill. Every attack was deliberate, every motion a combination of strength and experience. Alara realized that he was no longer the beta who had laughed at her weeks ago. He had changed, humbled by her courage and now seeking to redeem himself. Together, the three of them fought as one, their strengths complementing each other. Shadows dissolved under their combined force, and Alara felt a surge of exhilaration and relief. She had proven not only to herself but to everyone that she was capable, strong, and worthy of the mark. As the eclipse began to wane, the final shadow emerged. It was larger, darker, and more twisted than the others, and it radiated a presence that made the air tremble. Alara's heart skipped a beat. This was not just a test, it was the true challenge, the force that had been watching from the shadows, waiting for this moment. Tharian stepped forward, his sword raised, his eyes locked on the enemy. "Alara," he said quietly but firmly, "now we see what you are truly capable of. Trust the bond, trust yourself, and trust me." Alara nodded, drawing strength from his words and the quiet pulse of the mark. She felt a surge of power, a connection not just to Tharian but to herself. She was no longer the girl who had sought recognition. She was a warrior, marked by destiny, capable of facing darkness and overcoming it. The shadow surged, moving faster than anything she had seen. But Alara raised her hands, letting the energy of the mark flow through her, and a brilliant light erupted from her palms. The shadow shrieked, recoiling from the intensity of her power. Tharian struck with his sword and Kaelin followed, their coordinated strikes forcing the enemy back. For a long, tense moment, it seemed as if the battle would never end. Darkness and light collided, energy crackling through the air. And then, with a final surge, Alara focused all her strength, all her courage, and all her willpower. The shadow let out a final, echoing wail before dissolving entirely into mist. The battlefield fell silent. The eclipse had ended, sunlight slowly returning to the kingdom. Alara's knees gave way, and she sank to the ground, exhausted but victorious. Tharian knelt beside her, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You did it," he said softly, his silver eyes filled with pride and something more, a quiet warmth that spoke of trust, partnership, and unspoken feelings. Alara looked up at him, her chest still heaving. "We did it," she corrected gently. "Together." Kaelin approached, his expression somber but sincere. I owe you an apology," he said quietly. "I underestimated you, I doubted you, and I am proud of what you have become." Alara nodded, a small smile tugging at her lips. "Thank you, Kaelin, that means more than you know." For a long moment the three of them stood together, the aftermath of battle settling around them. The kingdom had been tested, the shadows defeated, and Alara had proven herself not only to Tharian but to everyone, including herself. As the sun rose fully, casting warm light over the castle, Alara realized something profound. The mark on her wrist was no longer just a symbol of connection. It was a reminder of her strength, her courage, and the bond that had carried her through darkness. She had faced fear, tested her limits, and discovered the power within her. Tharian extended his hand, and she took it without hesitation. "The journey is not over," he said quietly, "but we face it together." Alara felt a thrill run through her at his words. The bond was not just power, it was trust, partnership, and perhaps something deeper, something that neither of them yet fully named but both understood. Kaelin lingered nearby, watching the pair. He had learned lessons of humility, respect, and the quiet redemption that came from recognizing another's strength. He turned, ready to return to his own duties, knowing that the girl he had once laughed at had become a force that could not be ignored. Alara and Tharian stood atop the battlements, their eyes on the horizon. The kingdom stretched before them, sunlight reflecting off the towers and walls, a symbol of hope, strength, and the trials they had overcome. "Are you afraid?" Tharian asked, his voice gentle but curious. Alara shook her head, feeling the warmth of the mark, the bond between them, and the quiet strength she had discovered. "No," she said firmly. "I am ready. Whatever comes next, we face it together." Tharion's eyes softened, and for the first time he allowed a small smile to touch his lips. "Then we are stronger than ever," he said. The kingdom had survived the eclipse, the shadows had been defeated, and the bond between Alpha and Marked One had solidified into something unbreakable. Alara had found her strength, Tharion had found trust, and even Kaelin had discovered a path toward redemption. As the sunlight warmed the battlements and the wind whispered through the towers, Alara realized that this was only the beginning. Her destiny was vast, full of trials, challenges, and adventures yet to come, but she would not face them alone. The mark pulsed softly on her wrist, a quiet reminder of the journey, the bond, and the courage that had carried her through darkness. She breathed in the morning air, feeling alive, strong, and ready to face the world. The kingdom would remember this day, and the story of the girl who had been laughed at, the beta who had doubted her, and the alpha who had marked her would be told for generations. And somewhere in the quiet of her heart, Alara felt a thrill of anticipation, knowing that this was only the first chapter of a tale that would be written in courage, trust, and unbreakable bonds. The light of the sun bathed the kingdom, and for the first time in her life, Alara felt truly free.